make it against Ambition, just because the first, like the dungeons that we're playing, the first two, those are two dungeons that Ambition has done already, and they performed really well in those.
That's right. These teams are getting themselves prepared. Necrotic Wake is going to be the first dungeon in our series. Let's get it going right now between Ambition and Baguette.
Woo, right into it, right off the bat. Love that. Teams were ready, getting right into it, and a massive pull from both teams right off the bat. We saw this yesterday. Everything in this section of the dungeon on top of Blightbone. Use your spear, pop your Bloodlust, and check out the damage across the board. 200k on the rogues, over 100k for the mages and the Shadow Priests, and the Holy Paladin keeping up there doing 70 to 80k as well on the burst. Just ridiculous damage across the board. And it looks like Ambition has done a better job of dealing with all of this trash than Baguette. And on top of that, they've also pulled on top of that boss the Incinerator Argolath mob as well. We saw them pull this off yesterday with the 0 death run, and they're getting right back into it today.
Yeah, I'm very impressive by both of the teams. Baguette, of course, just pulling a little bit less, not necessarily less trash, they just didn't pull that Tormentor yet. So I wonder if they're going to be pulling it in eventually. Looks like they're picking up the orbs first from this Goliath that they're going to be repairing with their Steward, and then they can pick up those orbs to get that AoE damage around them. Ambition dropping incredibly low, actually, as they are dealing with this Tormentor still. Looks like they're having some trouble here. Did recover now, though. They have that buff as well, pulsing around them. You can see the animation around each of their characters. That's why they're stacking up on top of the boss to make sure they get that extra damage. And also the extra healing, which is incredibly valuable if you're doing these huge AoE pulls that does a lot of incoming damage as well. Then the orbs really just help out the healer.
Yeah, actually just purely calculated. Picking up those healing orbs right as they start running out of healing stuff. A little bit of a scary moment there. Some damage went off onto the group, but going to be able to keep themselves alive thanks to the help of those healing orbs, keeping them all nice and topped up. And check out where they are because of that. They've killed Blightbone, whereas Baguette still is at 30% or so on the boss. And that's a lot of HP to chew through still when you don't have those orbs up anymore, and you're on a tyrannical 20 key. This boss probably has about just shy of 1 million health left, maybe like 800k, so no cooldowns up. That's going to take a long time for them to finish off, and Ambition has already secured themselves about a 30-second or so advantage in this dungeon.
Yeah, and we know just how fast Ambition's clear is in this dungeon. Yesterday, with an 11-minute 41 clear, the fastest of this Group B so far. Absolutely crazy, the kind of pulls that they're doing here. JPC picking up those two weapons as they're now moving on to that Necromancer pull. I think they're going to be doing this because of the actually, they got some hit by some AoE here. Thankfully, no one went down, but I guess a bunch of casts went off from the mage, as well as getting hit by some of the effects on the ground. But they are fine as they're now picking up those orbs, and they're going to be gearing up for a huge pull in this area.
Yeah, but remember, they skip a lot of that early trash, especially that Narzuda section of the dungeon, in order to make up for that by going for an even bigger pull here. This is the rest of the trash that they'll need in order to move on to the rest of the dungeon. And then, of course, for the last 2 or 3% of their trash count, they're going to pull stuff into the boss using that Shard of D's mechanic that Holy Paladins have available to them right now. Oh, I mean, the confidence. They did that yesterday as well. Knowing that they can comfortably tank that Reaping Winds because they have the Anima Exhaust buff on them. 1 or 2 ticks from any of those buffs in the group, everyone's instantly topped off. Don't have to commit any major personal cooldowns to it. Just nice and easy. Looks scary, but really isn't.
Yeah, and definitely know exactly what they can and cannot pull off with the amount of incoming damage here. Of course, if everyone has to move out of that AoE, going to be a huge damage loss. So they just decide, you know what, maybe we can just stand in this. And turns out they can, as they're now dealing with Baruth by himself. Has a 50% healing reduction aura, which is just something they don't necessarily want to deal with when they're fighting Amarth, because Amarth has this AoE damage aura that does a lot of damage to your group, and if you have that healing reduction, it's just really difficult to pull off. That's why they just decide to deal with this by himself. And then afterwards, we're going to see that pull where they get the boss to its corner, as you can see Nerf just now kiting the boss over there, and then they're pulling these corpses that they left there to get that last % that they need before they can go up to the Necropolis.
And check out Baguette as well. They've been studying the route that Ambition did yesterday, and they're essentially going for the exact same pull. Looks like they missed a couple of mobs in the corner there. They missed that 2-pack right next to them, so they didn't get it into the initial damage buff that they had from the Anima Exhaust, plus the orb being used by the Demon Hunter tank here. But still, not too bad at all. They're doing a great job I mean, again, 0 deaths on the board. They're staying clean. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned that they could be the Obey Alliance to the next up tier of teams. They're keeping themselves within arm's length of Ambition here. So should Ambition trip up, have some mistakes, maybe even have a wipe on one of the bosses, Baguette will be there ready to pounce, ready to take them on. And, I mean, they're showing that right here. Also, I don't think I've ever seen that skip before.
Me neither.
That's
kind of nice. Yeah, that was really cool. He was there really quickly to just start that RP event, and now they're pulling the root. They are actually pulling it in position, I guess, to already pull the corpses now, or they might even pull the boss on top of this. I'm not sure what they're planning to do. Maybe they just want to get into position. And oh no, yeah, there we go. So they did pull the corpse on top of a root instead of pulling it on top of the boss. Very interesting. I really like Baguette's just route here. I guess it is Ambition's route that they're doing, but it's still interesting to see that they can pull this off. Of course, it's a bit slower compared to Ambition, but if Ambition makes a mistake at some point, then Baguette is just right behind them. So I really like this from Baguette.
What's the phrase I'm thinking of here? Imitation is the best form of flattery. It's the sincerest form of flattery. That's the term. Yeah, that's kind of what they're doing. And even if it is flattering Ambition, it's really hard to imitate someone and then do it better than them. So not too surprised that Ambition is still in the lead here. But I mean, Baguette is by all means impressing me right now. They're still on that 0 death run, but let's keep an eye on Ambition here as they go for this massive entire room pull here. Worked out great for them yesterday, but again, there's so many casters in this room, so much can go wrong. They have that Fleshcrafter CC'd off in the corner as Nerf goes around and pulls everything together, making sure they get the Collector interrupt so they can get everything stacked. And then once everything is stacked, Nerf can pop that orb, make sure everything stays silenced. JPC is going to use the spear here and pop to a massive amount of damage, 250k DPS from that burst. And just like that, almost everything is dead. The remnants of that orb are going to clear off everything else, and then Nerf just has to get out of dodge, get away from those Stitchworks, and that was picture perfect. That's exactly how that pull should go every single time.
Yeah, that was really beautiful by Ambition. Now they're going to mind control that Fleshcrafter to make sure they're going to get the 2 assistants to spawn. It looks like, yeah, they were just waiting. There we go. They already had mind controlled it, actually. They were just DPSing it a little bit to get it closer to that raging range, because we actually do have raging. So getting that Fleshcrafter a bit lower is really helpful to get the cleavers to do a bit more damage. As here is a little bit of RNG, because all of these 3 mobs cast cleavers that you can use as basically help you to do more damage to those assistants, but the cleavers can go on the same person. So if you have a bunch of cleavers go on the same person, it is actually impossible for you to get the cleavers into all of that. So some of them have to be tanked by players to make sure that the DPS or whoever got targeted didn't die. So they have to hope for good RNG to get the cleavers in different people so they can spread them out. But it looks like they did a good job. Now that Fleshcraft that they still have is in raging range, so they managed to get it low enough for the cleavers to actually do more damage to this gore grind here.
Yeah, exactly. And while Ambition is locked into this trash swanning animation over on Stitch Flesh here, let's keep an eye on Baguette and see if they're going to go for a similar sized pull, because that's what they need to do to keep themselves within arm's reach of Ambition. But it looks like they're not quite going for as big of a pull, only opting to go for all of the left side packs that includes the patrolling mobs. And again, one of the things that this particular pull type allows you to do is it lets you actually save that spear that your rogue is carrying. A couple people dropping low here, but no cheat deaths procced, no ice blocks used, no immunities used, nobody goes down either, so still keeping it clean. But that's a question that I have in terms of strategy. Is it actually worth using a spear on the AoE for safety, or is it actually potentially faster to save that spear for a boss? Because remember, we're on Tyrannical. These bosses last forever, and having a spear for a boss seems like it'd be a very big time save. Although, again, safety on a giant room pull is kind of nice.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question, and I'm pretty sure these teams have tried multiple different ways, because it's very hard to know exactly how much time you save by using a spear on trash versus using it on a boss. They must, especially because it's so late into the dungeon as well. If it would be like the first pull of the dungeon, then they could just test it a bunch of different times and see how it works out. But this is actually pretty late into the dungeon, as it's already in this like last area with the necropolis, and you can't just skip there. You actually have to go there, deal with all of this trash beforehand, and have the boss spawn. So testing whichever strategy is better is taking quite a long time, and I think most of the time they just like theorize what's going to be better and go with their gut feeling, what they assume is better. And for Ambition, it seemed like that they chose to use that spear on the trash, while Baguette is feeling like the spear on the boss might be better. So we'll see if Baguette can catch up eventually, but it's gonna be so hard for them because Ambition is just having such a flawless run right now. They're fighting Surgeon Stitch Flash, and they're 10 minutes into the dungeon and almost done with the trash as well. Only have to do the last boss after this one, so I don't know, it's so hard to beat Ambition here. It's such a clean dungeon by them and such a clean route.
I mean, they're pretty much on pace with their run that they had in this dungeon yesterday. This looks just clinical from them. These guys are not having any mistakes. The run yesterday was 11:41, I believe, with 0 deaths. They're going for that again today. I mean, this is just... I mean, this is, again, the kind of runs we expect from a team that's been playing the game this much, that's been practicing this much, that's put all this work in. These guys have been playing absolutely lights out in this dungeon, and... honestly, I feel like they should be favorites to get to that finals, to take one of those 2 spots that we have to the global finals later on if they continue to play like this. But again, that upper bracket matchup where they kind of faltered a bit was a little worrying. I mean, that might be one of those things where it's your first time making mistakes, you get a little bit flustered. But now that you have that out of the way, now that you know what that feels like, it can kind of help you in the long run if you make mistakes again.
Yeah, definitely. As Ambition is now using that Bloodlust to make sure they get Nelthor done quicker. They are trying to avoid the exile cast, but it looks like once he did actually get exiled, he is dying on purpose to make sure that they can get him back up here so he can help them to finish up the boss. Because of course downstairs there's not... it's gonna take him a lot longer to get to that mini mob and kill it off and then come back up. Instead, it's better to just basically lose the 5 seconds and get the rest up upstairs. So that's exactly what they did here, and they're still using that Flash Crafted to get the extra damage into the boss, preferably when the shield is up. As you just saw, the shield was up on Nelthor, so the damage on the group is reduced by making sure the Cleaver just immediately gets rid of that shield.
Ooh, I think Nerf took that last tick of the Comet Storm there, but it's not going to be enough to take him down. And Ambition, not quite the perfect run they had yesterday, but well and good enough to put them in the lead in this series over Baguette 1-0.
That's right, Ambition with a strong Necrotic Wake run. Like you said, we have high expectations for this team, and they have very high expectations as well for themselves. They take that victory a little bit slower than what they've done in the past, but hey, it's the momentum that they want to keep on building as they need a lot of it to make this lower bracket run, Tettles.
Yeah, I think that this is a good morale booster after the very hard matchup that they had versus Obey Alliance earlier in the day. I think that just being able to take this deathless Necrotic Wake where there was some invisible time loss just due to Javelin placements and like other issues, but ultimately this was a really good run from Ambition, and they have a lot to be proud of with this run versus Baguette.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's why they are the 2nd seed in this bracket and in this grouping and everything like that. We're looking to see how well they're going to be able to perform over a very long period of time. And we've seen these sort of marathon streams that, the players from Ambition have been doing as well. Nagura pushing high keys for hours and hours on end. Now, they have to get their cadence together because they have very specific dungeons that they're going to be doing in order to make their full run if they want to be able to make it to the finals and secure their group spot for the globals.
Yeah, I mean, dropping this into the lower bracket so early, I'm not sure if that's something they maybe expected. So I wonder if they are prepared for all of those tiers that they're going to be playing, because they're so prepared, right? They practice so much, and you can totally see it in some of those dungeons that they're running incredibly fast times. But then this close series against Obey Alliance, dropping them into the lower bracket, it's definitely not something that they wanted, but since they are so practiced, I think they're going to be making it pretty far even in the lower bracket. But yeah, a lot harder to do it in the lower bracket, of course, than into the upper bracket, because you have so many less games that you have to play up in the upper bracket, and it's also just more relaxing. You can prepare more for the final as well, right? So long run for Ambition here if they want to make it.
That's right, and we're going to be looking at 2 more elimination rounds here as Ambition is up 1, so after that starts coming around, though, Zyro, we got to start setting our sights as well on what Championship Sunday is going to look like and who is going to be continuously moving on and what dungeons people are practiced up on. Because thankfully in this series, this is a number of dungeons that Ambition is already well practiced on for what they were going for. But later on, there's going to be more dungeons. We got to see the entire breadth of their keys.
Yeah, I mean, looking ahead at the lower bracket matches that they would have ahead of them if they do win and go on here, I mean, the lower semis and the lower finals are 6 completely different dungeons. That alone means you have to put practice into 6 out of the 8 dungeons that we have available in this expansion, and that's a lot of time to split yourself between. And of course, you have the added disadvantage of being in that lower bracket where you play the lower semis, you don't have time to practice for the lower finals. But the team that's coming down to the lower finals from the upper bracket did have an entire match worth of time to practice for that match. So pretty much if they win this match, they're going to get a pretty small amount of sleep tonight because they're going to have to practice for a lot of games tomorrow.
No question on that one. And as we start looking at Tettles, I thought you were going to jump in there. My bad. Tettles, what was actually a little bit slower about this run on the side of Ambition than their previous one? Because this is like 45 seconds or almost a minute or so slower than what we saw previously, which is a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it comes down to the Javelin usage. In this pull here, you really want those soldiers and those Blightbacks to be killed off before you use the Javelin. However, in this run, Ambition actually just launches that Javelin a little bit earlier than they did in previous runs, and it becomes, since it does split damage so heavily, it just becomes a little bit slower for dealing with some of the remaining trash, and it just does less damage to Blightbound. And I think that right there is what costs them somewhere probably in the range of like 10 to 15 seconds, just with how long the boss is going to take. There are a couple of discrepancies towards the middle of their dungeon. How long it took to get these corpses snapped on Amarth and how long Amarth ended up taking was also a little bit different. And you see JPC here absolutely launching the Javelin into every single mob. And while that is also good here, you don't really want the Javelin hitting these soldiers either for similar reasons that you didn't want them hitting the Blight Bags in the first pull. And it's because... Sure, it is important to get these mobs killed off, but at the same time, there are higher priority mobs. You would much rather it just annihilate the Stitchworks and annihilate those loyal creations and not be split with those low HP mobs. Ultimately, Ambition is able to get the pack killed off really easily, so it's no harm, no foul. But at the same time, it is something that they could get punished for, at least time-wise, if they were playing against a team that is capable of doing something like even... an 11:41, which is what Ambition got earlier on in the weekend. If a different team is able to put up a similar time, then they could get punished for like minor mistakes like that. Even things that to the eye you wouldn't even classify them really as a mistake. It's just an inefficiency, right?
Yeah, and I mean, efficiency is really what it's going to be all about. I mean, like we said, a little bit of criticism there for them being a bit slower in their second Necrotic Wake run. Usually we want to be seeing them going faster each time that we're playing them in competition. Now we're going to see their second iteration of Theater of Pain as well, Nagura, where they did actually have a faster time than we saw out of Complexity by a pretty slim margin.
Yeah, so their best time is 20 minutes 43. So I think it was like 30 seconds faster than what we've seen from Complexity as well. So definitely the best time still. But there's of course a lot of room for error because it is such a long dungeon. But if Baguette actually does have a similar strategy in that dungeon as well, because in Necrotic Wake we saw them actually be pretty close to Ambition. So if Ambition would have made mistake with a wipe here or there, then Baguette definitely had a chance of catching up. So I am personally really impressed by Baguette since they are one of the lower seeded teams with that 15th seed coming in from the time trials. I think they are performing really well for that seed. And if Ambition makes some sort of mistakes because they maybe didn't think of playing this dungeon again or I don't know what, then I think there's a good chance for Baguette to catch up because they're playing really clean. They don't have a lot of these huge wipes where we see like 20 deaths or whatever from the teams that we see from some of the other lower teams. So yeah, I do think Ambition definitely needs to fight for this one for sure.
Yeah, and it's always going to be something that they have to fight for, constantly kind of competing against themselves and getting themselves ready for those later dungeons as well. I mean, if you think about it, when you're looking at how well these teams or how much these teams have to prepare for everything, if they are looking at sort of the map of where they're going to be going for which dungeons they're going to be playing, this is always going to be something that they want to be well practiced on because of how early on they're going to be tested in theater. And also, let's not forget, if they want to be making it to the global finals like they're expecting to, the finals for our group is also going to feature theater. So let's see what they got and see if they can improve upon their first time here and set a new best, as Ambition is up 1 right now against Baguette.
And already a little bit of a change in their first strategy here. They don't have that contender CC'd off to the side, so that inspired mob is just going to be in the group. They're going to focus it down with that rogue focus damage, but that's just a little bit of a scary moment there. Bop used already to make sure Onesie isn't CC'd by that lurking shadow mob, that assassin. And I mean, honestly, all things considered, even having that inspired in the group, it seemed like it was pretty safe. I mean, you are in the Ashen Hollow, you do have Bloodlust active, so it shouldn't be too dangerous. But, I mean, adding scary things like that is what the MDI is about. You gotta go for it. It's definitely going to be a lot faster than the strategy we saw from Complexity earlier this weekend, where they did CC that inspired mob in the corner and only brought it in once all the rest of the mobs were dead.
Yeah, I agree. Both of them also switching their comp up a little bit. As you can see, both of them switch to that Prot Warrior. Prot Warrior just really good in Theater of Pain for a bunch of reasons. First of all, they're just really good against physical damage, and then they also have the Spell Reflect, which is valuable on a bunch of different bosses and also on trash. As Baguette, though, on the other hand, they chose to go with a Fire Mage, actually, in comparison to Ambition having that MM Hunter, which makes sense because you have that extra physical damage with the AP shot from the Warrior and also the Mythic touch from the Windwalker. So interesting choice to see Baguette going with the Mage here. Maybe they don't know how to play Hunter. Maybe it was a comfort pick. Not sure, but otherwise, I think I like the comp as well from Baguette.
Yeah, it's for sure a comfort pick. In terms of all of the 8 dungeons that we have in Shadowlands, I would say that Theater of Pain is probably Fire Mage's worst dungeon, because it's pretty much just all single target or prio damage, things Fire Mage is not necessarily that great at. Yeah, there's 1 or 2 pulls that get made a little bit easier by having a Fire Mage, namely like the massive pulls that you can do in Gore Chop Swing, but I think Marksman Hunter, specifically Kyrian Marksman Hunter, kind of fills that same role of Burst AoE that helps deal with most of the dangerous mobs. So again, definitely a comfort pick, but that might be one of those things that ends up costing them a little bit of time later on.
Yeah, definitely. Ambition having some issues here as they're doing that same pull that they did last time with Veruth, and also some of those Shackled Souls. So a huge amount of incoming damage while having that 50% healing reduction in the group. Just really hard for Ellesmere to get everyone out of this Grievous range with these affixes. This is such a difficult pull, actually. Even though they're not pulling a lot of mobs, it's just this physical this healing reduction aura making it so hard. But they did manage to pull it off as they're now picking up their anima power. And Baguette, on the other hand, basically just skipped Veruth. They were not dealing with Veruth at all, just immediately went into that Shackled Soul area, dealing with the Arcoleth as well, so the Fire Tormentor that is going to give them that damage power, and also dealing with the Guardian.
Yeah, exactly. And I like you mentioned, the way that they opt to pull Veruth. I mean, again, in the MDI, we're all about efficiency, going for the most efficient pulls whatsoever. And what's the worst thing you can do for efficiency? Single target a big mob down. That is always not the thing you want to do. You always want to try to AoE it with something, get some trash on top of it, be it just so that you're also getting some trash count while you're dealing with that mob, or in the case of Subtlety Rogues, giving them a little bit of funnel so that they can do even more single target to the important target. And pulling those Shackled Souls on top of Veruth, while dangerous, it's just definitely a more efficient thing to do overall, and being able to pull that off is going to save them a lot of time in the long run. And also, they're just going to have an extra DPS Tormentor buff for this entire wing, or rather for the entire dungeon now, over Baguette. And then remember, each one of those Tormentor buffs is about, depending on how valuable Critter Mastery is for your class, somewhere from 5 to 10% damage. So it's a pretty significant buff to gain.
Yeah, that's something that we don't talk about too often, is some of those teams just picking up those damage powers earlier than others really has an impact on the damage for that time that the other team doesn't have it. So that is something that even if you maybe are a bit slower in the routing because you maybe have to backtrack a little, it still might be worth it in the long run because of that extra damage increase that you're gaining. Now, Baguette is playing Alliance, right? You can see they're actually playing Dwarves. They have those Dwarf racials. Well, Ambition is playing Horde. We saw them play Horde yesterday because of this, mainly because of the Arcane Torrent, the Blood Elf racial that they're using for these mages to dispel the shields that they have as soon as you pull them. And because they do this pull specifically here with the Guardian and all of those mages, they immediately just want to dispel all of those shields to make sure they get all of the damage onto them. Otherwise, the Hunter could be dispelling them individually, but it takes much longer, of course, than to just use that Arcane Torrent and get rid of them immediately. So a small little damage gain, having that I mean, makes sense for them to go Horde. And it's interesting to see that no one else really thought about this before.
That was almost a terrible scenario there for Baguette. If that Soulstorm got one tick off after that volley went off on them, that could have been a lot of deaths on the board for them. Fortunately, wasn't the case. They were able to deal with it, but man, that was a very scary moment here. Now, Ambition, again, with the damage buffs, check out how far they've pushed themselves ahead of Baguette here. They're on the next platform, away from Baguette already. They have more trash count. They have the extra buffs. And look at the damage the Hunter is pumping out here. I mean, yes, Fire Mage does have more burst potential on AoE pulls, but Hunter is pretty much right up there with them. I mean, they're doing great damage in general, and I'm really curious to see what the overall damage is going to be like after this dungeon is over, because really there's not a whole lot of support for the Fire Mage in that group, right? Usually when you see Fire Mage, they're babied with a couple other things. They have a Vengeance Demon Hunter for that magic debuff. They also usually have a priest to give them PI and Fey Guardian so they can bust more often. Without those, it seems like it's not that great of a class for the MDI scenario.
Yeah, and then, I mean, on top of that, you also have to think about the fact that Theater of Pain is kind of known to be a dungeon where a lot of the pools aren't that big, right? Because you're, for example, here you have these platforms. If you look at Ambition, there's really not anything else they can pull on top of this trash pool. They only have these 3 mobs. And this happens quite often where in the Xav wing as well, where you have all of those mini bosses and you can't necessarily pull too much on top of those either. So having a Hunter there's a little bit maybe more versatile. Mage really excels in these like huge AoE pulls where you can make use of your uncapped AoE. But if there aren't a lot of those huge AoE pulls, then the value definitely diminishes, and that's why I also do prefer the Hunter, especially also because you run that physical damage comp, right? The Mage doesn't have the Vengeance Demon Hunter to give him the magic buff, and you just have all of these physical damage amplifiers that just help out the Hunter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we both agree that the Hunter is a stronger choice, if only marginally, still a better choice in this particular Theater of Pain scenario that they're in with the comps they're running. And I mean, check out the advantage again. The gap is only widening here. And remember, not only do they have those 2 extra buffs, that also means they've dealt with an entire extra Tormentor mob as well. So yeah, they're an entire platform ahead, halfway of a boss ahead, and 1 entire Tormented mob ahead. This is probably a 2-minute plus gap that Ambition has opened up for themselves. And yes, there's still a lot of dungeon left, so there's a lot of room to make mistakes, but it just seems like Baguette is getting further and further behind every minute we're in this time.
Yeah, even though they're playing clean, you can see still 0 deaths on the board, so you really gotta give it to them for being so clean and not having a lot of mistakes. But it's just a hard task, right? Ambition is just so efficient, having practiced this dungeon a lot, and having the fastest run of Group B, so the fastest run of any team so far that we've seen. Really hard to compete against that, as Ambition is pulling up those Shackled Souls on top of Kultarak. So a lot of incoming damage here in the group. This is pretty risky and pretty dangerous, especially with Grievous as well on the group. You can see Ellesmere dropping really low because of that magic debuff that he cannot dispel, because there's always 2 that get applied and he can only dispel 1. So having a lot of damage coming out of these Shackled Souls on top of all of the boss mechanics, definitely scary.
Yeah, but again, one of the ways they mitigate that is by waiting for some of their shorter CD cooldowns to come up. For instance, whenever the Hunter has his volley up, whenever he has his second true shot up, whenever you have a Storm Within Fire charge available, that's when they go and they pull those mobs on top of the boss just to make sure they can cleave them down. So Ellesmere doesn't really have to sit on any of his big buttons in order to keep the group alive. So yeah, again, great execution from Ambition. Exactly what we're expecting from him, from this team. But here we go. This is the wing that's make or break for a lot of teams. There's big pulls back to back to back to back. And then, of course, some teams like to pull trash on top of the boss as well. So let's see how that goes. And already not starting off the right way is that Inspired Mob is pulled into the group, but they're able to DPS it down before any of those major casts get off. So not going to be too big of a deal. But because of that, they have to pull in some mobs late. So the HPs are going to be a little bit staggered. Let's see how this goes for them.
Yeah, so they did a good job finishing off that Inspired Mob to make sure they can interrupt the rest of them, because you definitely do not want to have an Inspired Mob up for this pool because of all of these really important casts that need to be interrupted, specifically the Sludge Spewers. If that cast goes through, it's going to be a 20% damage reduction on the whole group, plus also a healing reduction, so definitely I don't want to see that. Now it looks like they're using their Shroud to go past this trash pack. They don't want to deal with this. It makes sense because there's another Inspired Mob in there, and these mobs obviously just so notorious to having those crazy casts that you don't want to deal with at all. So they just skip past it, and now they're going into this gas bag area with Gorge up as well. So we'll see what they do here as JPC is already going ahead, proccing the bridge here. It looks like they're still stealthing past. Okay, so they're just going to be engaging Gorge up and pulling a lot of trash on top of this. This is another really scary moment.
Yeah, here we go. All the trash coming in, and this is what we're talking about. This is what they were saving that second Bloodlust for, and here we go. All of this trash, well, actually not being pulled on top of Gorchop. They're waiting until they get rid of all the small mobs before they go in. I actually like that play, making sure they're staying a little bit safe. As long as those massive mobs get killed in the next few seconds here, they should be fine. Any extra Devour Fleshes or strikes going onto the tank is going to be a lot of damage they have to worry about here. They stun that Devour Flesh. They don't have to worry about that extra damage. Great. Oh man, great usage of their abilities there, but the chop does go on to JPC and proc his cheat death. But honestly, if that's all you lose on that pull, I think you're pretty happy.
Yeah, definitely are, as they dealt with the Butcher and the gas bag so fast. That was actually incredible, because there's just so much AoE damage coming out of this gas bag, and then you also saw that bleed effect that got applied to JPC, because I believe it's like one of the closest targets that it hits, and there's just so much damage as well on top of that Grievous. But they are fine, as they're now dealing with the rest of Gorchop. Should be no problem. It is, of course, fortified, so the bosses don't have too much HP, but it's still at 22, which is, of course, still scary. Yeah, they also have to deal with those leftovers. They can actually be pretty annoying, because they jump on random targets and do a pretty decent amount of damage to them. And sometimes if you have both of the leftovers jump on the same person, then it can be a scary amount of damage to heal for Ellesmere.
Well, yeah, I mean, and even if you get like a Devour plus a chop at the same time, that could just straight up kill you or proc your cheat instantly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely like a very scary pull, and I don't want to try to undersell it too much. They made it look super easy, but it's definitely up there with any of the more difficult pulls in MDI that we have available this expansion.
Yep, Gorchop is going down. Baguette, of course, a little bit behind. They're still dealing with one of these Butcher packs in front of Gorchop. So they did decide to take the same kind of wing, but just doing everything just a little bit slower. Maybe they're not too practiced in this dungeon, because it definitely looks like they're taking it really slowly, you know, sustaining the inspired mobs here, making sure they go one by one, which is, again, something I like about Baguette, is that they're not necessarily, you know, going in, doing super risky pulls and then just wiping it up. They definitely are pretty clean on their side. And it looks like they're even committing that Bloodlust for the gas bag pool here. So pulling the gas bag with the Sludge Spewers here in the bridge, but they're going down, unfortunately, as their tank goes down. I believe it was maybe a frontal that was aimed a little bit weirdly, so they had a hard time dodging that too.
It might have been the backle. Might have been both, actually.
Maybe it was the backle, yeah.
I don't know which one it was, but definitely killed off two of them. And I'm not sure if they're going to be able to get a res off. Yeah, they have to commit the battle res, because you remember they're in combat with that diseased Tor that they have CC'd off in the corner. So both of the battle reses they have available now being used in this section of the dungeon. I mean, they didn't really have any other choices than that, right? They don't have Shadow Melds available to drop combat and get a res off. I mean, Paladin never has Shadow Meld available for that. So yeah, just unfortunately not clean enough, as that's going to be another handicap that's not available for them down the road.
Yeah, I'm definitely struggling a little bit with that pull. Thankfully, they did manage to finish it off, though, and not have a full team wipe, so at least something out of this unfortunate mistake there. Ambition, though, on the other hand, they're already in that Xav area. They are dealing with a bunch of mini bosses here. I believe that they're going to pull all 3 mini bosses, so they're going to be dealing with all those. And the captain is something that they're going to be doing later on, as soon as Ellesmere is going up there, trioing the event for the last boss. So that captain is going to stay his seat for quite a long time while they deal with the rest of the trash. They're dealing with Haruja here and the Arbalist, so that's actually pretty scary, as there's a bunch of bleed effects coming out on the whole group. That's why they also commit the Ashen for this one.
Yep, and I mean, that's probably one of the greatest places to use it, right? Haruja has the group damage, as you'd see. You're very scared of all of the extra damage going out of the group with the 2 Arbalists, so yeah, very safe way to use your cooldowns there. The only nitpick I have about it is that they won't have the Ashen Wings combo available for Zav. but I guess that's fine because it will be back up almost immediately for the final boss when you get there right after Zav. I feel like Zav is a little bit more of a scary moment, though, right? Because most teams still opt to go for that no banner strat, meaning if you run out of movement abilities, you're probably just dead in the water.
Yeah, and we've seen teams maybe not completely wiped to it, but we've definitely seen deaths here or there because of that banner slow that they still had up while trying to dodge the area of denials of that boss. And on top of that, they also have to be very careful on where they stand when they get thrown into the arena, just because if they stand in the wrong spot and they get thrown close to Sogodon, that of course they didn't deal with, then they're going to be aggroing that Tormentor, and they don't want that, because if they pull Sogodon, it's very likely going to be a wipe because of the way that Sogodon pulls you in and then roots you, and if that happens while Xav is doing his combo, then you're definitely going to die.
Oh yeah, I mean, I also feel like Sogodon has a mechanic where if nobody's in melee range and he doesn't have any way of getting to anybody in your group, he just does AoE damage
Grips
to
you.
everyone. Yeah. Well, no,
Doesn't
I'm
he
pretty sure he
grip
just
you, or
does. He tries to grip you. but
Maybe.
If he doesn't have a line on you, I'm pretty sure he just explodes for AoE damage. I mean, I've accidentally pulled Sogodon on one of my groups a couple times, and you just die even if he's not upstairs with you. So I don't know what happens, but he just if you pull him, you pretty much are gonna wipe. So let's see if they're able to pull it off. It looks like he hasn't been tagged this time, so they're safe for now. If they get a second duel, see if it happens again. Maybe the second duel people just AFK if that happens. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like a ridiculously scary thing, but most of our teams have figured out a way to not have to deal with that.
Yeah, I think it only happened once so far in the MDI, and that team definitely wiped. And unfortunately, not only did they wipe, but then they were still in combat with Sogodon, and they had a really hard time de-aggroing that mob. I think they ended up just killing it, because he was still in combat with them, but he didn't snap to them. So he was just like slowly walking backwards towards them and constantly stopped to cast something. So they had a really hard time even getting him down. But Ambition not having any of those issues whatsoever, as you can see, except already down to 5%. And they did a lot of damage here. It looks like JPC just completely blasting this boss. And Ellesmere now moving up to the last boss. He's going to be triggering that RP event to make sure that the boss is spawning faster, while the rest of the team is dealing with this ancient captain they kept succeed for this whole time to get the 100% trash.
Yep, and again, this isn't a big time loss as well. We were talking earlier about how you never want to just deal with one single target mob almost ever. But remember, they're still dealing with the RP that's going on while the last boss is spawning. So normally when you go upstairs, you have to sit there and wait for the boss to spawn for like 30-40 seconds. But you'll notice that I believe, it's Ellesmere. Ellesmere is nowhere near the group right now. That's because he's already upstairs. He already started the RP. So the boss should be available pretty much right when they get up top. And there he is, spawning in right now. Perfect time save for Ambition here. And they're well on their way to going for a sub 20 minute in the State of Pain here. Only thing that might not get them there is they don't have their Bloodlust available here.
Yeah, this is actually, it looks like they're faster than they were last time even, and they already have the record for this dungeon. So impressive to see that they're even improving upon their own time that they were setting. And you can see 0 deaths. The last time they had 1 death on the board, this time flawless. 100% trash, 0 deaths, only more Dretha left for them to kill. Of course, they do have that physical damage increase that they have to worry about on nerf. And they also have the slow, which can be annoying when you get pulled into that portal by Mordretha, but shouldn't be a problem for them. Sometimes RNG is bad because it just spawns on top of the boss, right? And then you have to worry about it getting away, and then you lose a little bit of uptime on the boss as well because she doesn't want to move immediately. So let's hope for a good RNG here so they can beat their own time.
Ooh, let's see. Let's see where that funnel goes. Ooh. Bait it away, guys, bait it away. They're not even
Oh no.
getting it. They just put it into the wall. And that's the worst place to put it because there's one right next to them.
Yeah.
Alright, fortunately they're all able to figure out how to dodge it still. They are world-class MDI / rank 1 players, anyways, so it's not too surprising. Would have been really weird if they had an entire clean dungeon over the course of 20 minutes and then just wiped through a funnel on the last boss at 10%. But it's not meant to be, as Ambition takes their revenge series here in the lower bracket, proving that was just a fluke in the upper bracket, and they'll be moving on to our final day here.
There it is, Ambition taking the 2-0 sweep.